Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into ecology. That's the scientific study of, well, how organisms interact with each other and their environment. It's kind of like understanding the blueprint for our planet Earth. And honestly, it's super foundational to modern biology.
It really is.
Why, though? What makes it so fundamental?
Well, because ecology connects literally everything. From the tiniest microbe right up to the global climate, it shows us how life doesn't just, scrape by. It thrives, it adapts, it's all interconnected.
So it's about seeing that massive picture, but also understanding the crucial little details.
Exactly. And it's those details, those interactions that reveal this incredible dance of life. Think about that tiny frog found in Papua New Guinea, Pataphrena moensis. It's only, 8 millimeters long?
Tiny.
Right. But it's completely dependent on its specific little spot, its conditions, other species, just to find a mate and survive. It's a perfect example of how every single living thing has its place, its niche, shaped by everything around it.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so let's get ready to explore the big ideas, the processes, and maybe some surprising bits that help us grasp this web of life and, importantly, our own role in it. Let's start with the stage itself, the Earth's physical environment. What dictates where life can even exist on this planet? What shapes those big life zones?
Okay, so the main director here is global climate. And it all kicks off with the sun. Because the Earth is round and tilted, the sunlight hits different parts with different intensity. The tropics get the most direct hit, more heat, more light.
Makes sense, like a solar oven, strongest in the middle.
Pretty much. And that uneven heating drives everything else. Global air circulation, rainfall patterns. You get warm, moist air rising near the equator. It cools, drops rain, hello, tropical forests. Then that dry air comes down around 30 degrees north and south latitude.
Creating deserts.
Exactly, creating those big arid zones. It's this huge planet-sized engine driven by the sun.
Incredible. But it's not just these massive global patterns, is it? What about local stuff, like mountains or oceans?
Oh, absolutely. Local features have a massive impact. Take large bodies of water. They moderate coastal climates, right? Think about the Gulf Stream. It keeps northwestern Europe way milder than, say, parts of Canada at the exact same latitude.
Right.
And mountains, huge influence. They create rain shadows. Air goes up one side, cools, drops its moisture. By the time it comes down the other side, the leeward side, it's dry. It actually sucks moisture out, creating deserts, like the Mojave Desert behind the Sierra Nevada.
So these climate factors, global and local, they create distinct types of ecosystems, biomes, right?
That's the term, yes, biomes. And they range hugely. On land, you've got everything from tropical forests packed with life to deserts where everything's adapted to conserve water. You have savannas, tundras. The key thing is how life adapts to the specific conditions. Nocturnal animals in deserts, thorny trees in savannas, that kind of thing.
And what about in the water? Is it mainly climate there too?
Less about climate, more about the physical environment itself. Light penetration is huge, obviously. Temperature, salinity, water flow. So you get everything from super productive wetlands and estuaries where rivers meet the sea to deep lakes, fast streams, those dynamic intertidal zones covered and uncovered by tides. Even the deep ocean, like hydrothermal vents running on chemical energy, not sunlight. It's incredibly diverse.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. Once you have an environment, a biome, what decides which species actually lives there? Is it just, can it survive the temperature?
No, not at all. It's way more complex. Part of it is evolutionary history, like kangaroos are only in Australia because that's where their ancestors were when the continents split. Dispersal matters. But then you have the biotic factors, other living things.
Yeah. Competition, predators.
Exactly. Predators, things that eat them, things that compete with them for food or space, parasites, diseases. All of these can limit where a species can actually live, even if the climate is perfect. There's a really stark example with a sea urchin, Centrostephanus rogersii. Off Tasmania, the ocean's warmed up just enough past this critical 12 degrees Celsius point.
Okay.
And this urchin has been able to move south, expanding its range, but as it moves, it's just mowing down the kelp forests.
Wow. So an abiotic change, the temperature, leads to a huge biotic impact.
Precisely. It shows how physical limits like cells freezing or proteins breaking down in heat interact with these biological pressures to determine where a species can actually make a living.
Okay, let's zoom in a bit then. From the whole community down to just one species, a population. How do ecologists study these groups?
So population ecology looks at a few key things. Density. How many individuals are packed into an area? Dispersion, how they're spaced out. Are they clumped together like sea stars around a food source?
Yeah.
Uniformly spaced, like
Yeah.
nesting penguins defending territory? Or just random, like wind-blown dandelion seeds?
And how do they track changes? Births and deaths.
Yeah. Demographics,
Yeah.
birth rates, death rates, immigration, emigration. And a key tool here is something called a life table, which leads to survivorship curves.
Survivorship curves.
Oh,
Okay, what do those tell us? Sounds important.
they really are. They plot the proportion of individuals from an initial group, a cohort, that are still alive at each age. And you see distinct patterns. Type 1, like us or elephants, starts flat. Most individuals live to old age, then the curve drops steeply. We have few offspring, but care for them well.
Right.
Type 3 is the opposite. Think oysters. A massive drop early on, huge death rate for larvae, but then it flattens out for the few lucky survivors. Lots of offspring, little care.
And type 2.
Type 2 is like some rodents or lizards. Pretty constant death rate throughout their life. Each type reflects a different fundamental strategy for survival and reproduction.
Okay, so that covers survival odds. What about population growth? How do numbers increase and what stops them from just taking over the world?
Well, under ideal conditions, with plenty of resources, populations can grow exponentially. It's a J-shaped curve accelerating growth, like bacteria doubling every 20 minutes, or maybe elephants in a protected park initially.
But that can't last forever, right?
Exactly. In nature, resources run out. Space, food, water, whatever. That leads to logistic growth. The curve starts like a J, but then slows down and levels off.
Treating an S shape.
Yes, an S-shaped curve. It levels off at the carrying capacity, or K. That's the maximum population size the environment can sustainably support.
That makes intuitive sense, limits.
Right.
And you mentioned trade-offs earlier with survivorship curves. How do those play into growth and life cycles?
They're central. Organisms have a limited energy budget. Investing heavily in one thing, like making tons of offspring, usually means less investment somewhere else. So dandelions make thousands of tiny seeds, hoping a few land well. A Brazil nut tree makes far fewer seeds, but they're huge and packed with nutrients. Different bets, you could say.
Or like the kestrel example. Caring for more chicks means the mother might not survive the winter as well.
Exactly that trade-off. It's about resource allocation. Ecologists sometimes talk about K-selection versus raw selection. K-selected species thrive near the carrying capacity, often with fewer well-cared-for offspring. WAR-selected species focus on rapid reproduction in uncrowded environments.
And what regulates population size day to day, besides the ultimate carrying capacity?
It can be density-dependent factors, things that get worse as the population gets denser, like competition for food, spread of disease, predation pressure. Or it can be density-independent factors, things like a drought, a flood, a harsh winter. They affect a similar proportion of the population regardless of how crowded it is.
So populations naturally fluctuate.
Oh, definitely. Look at the moose on Isle Royale. Their numbers go up and down based on wolves, weather severity, parasites. It's dynamic.
Okay, we've covered single populations.
Mhm.
Now, how do different species interact within a community? That seems like the next layer of complexity.
It is. And that's community ecology. These interspecific interactions between species are really the heart of it. We can broadly categorize them. There's competition where both species are negatively affected, like fighting over the same food source. There's exploitation where one benefits and the other is harmed. That includes predation, herbivory eating plants, and parasitism. And then there are positive interactions where at least one benefits and neither is harmed. Mutualism and commensalism fall here.
Okay, let's unpack those a bit. Predation seems straightforward, but there must be cool adaptations involved.
Absolutely incredible ones. Prey evolve camouflage, warning colors like bright patterns saying I'm poisonous, or even mimicking something dangerous. Think of a harmless fly that looks just like a stinging bee.
Predation mimicry, right.
That's the one. And predators, of course, evolve keen senses, speed, claws, fangs, their own camouflage for ambushing. It's an evolutionary arms race.
And herbivory, plants fighting back.
Definitely. Plants aren't passive victims. They evolve thorns, spines, tough leaves, or chemical defenses, toxins like nicotine or strychnine.
And positive interactions, like the cleaner fish.
Yeah, mutualism, where both benefit. The cleaner wrasse gets a meal, the moray eel gets rid of parasites, or ants defending an acacia tree that provides them food and shelter. Both win.
What about commensalism?
That's where one benefits and the other is pretty much unaffected, like cattle egrets hanging around bison, eating the insects the bison flush out. The birds benefit. The bison probably don't care much either way, though sometimes these can shift towards mutualism.
Within these communities, I've heard about species having sort of outsized impacts. even if they aren't the most common.
Yes, definitely. We talk about foundation species, usually abundant ones that create habitat, like coral or trees. They form the base. But then you have keystone species, often much less abundant, but their role is pivotal. The classic example is the Pisaster sea star in the Pacific Northwest.
What does it do?
It eats mussels, which are really strong competitors. By keeping the mussel population in check, the sea star allows lots of other species, algae, barnacles, limpets, to live there. Remove the sea star, the mussels take over, and diversity plummets.
Wow, so it holds the whole system together.
In a way, yes. And then you also have ecosystem engineers like beavers. They don't just interact, they physically change the environment by building dams, creating wetlands that whole new communities can use.
It sounds incredibly interconnected, almost like a delicate machine. What happens when things get disrupted? A storm, a fire?
Well, the older view was that communities were mostly stable, in equilibrium. But the more modern view, the non-equilibrium model, recognizes that disturbance is actually normal, even necessary sometimes.
Really? Disturbance is good.
Moderate levels often are. That's the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Too little disturbance, and dominant competitors exclude others. Too much, and only the most resilient or fastest colonizers survive. But moderate disturbance, like occasional fires or floods of a certain intensity, can knock back dominant species just enough to allow others to thrive, maximizing diversity.
And disturbance leads to change over time.
Right.
Succession.
Exactly. Ecological succession. If it starts from basically bare rock, like after a glacier retreats, that's primary succession. Pioneer species, like lichens or hardy plants, slowly build soil, paving the way for others. If it's after a disturbance that leaves soil and some organisms, like a forest fire, that's secondary succession. Regrowth is usually faster. Early species might even help later ones arrive.
Okay, let's zoom out again.
Yeah.
To the biggest scale, the ecosystem. All the organisms plus their physical environment. How does energy and matter move through these huge systems?
Right, ecosystems. Two key things happen here. Energy flows and chemicals cycle. Energy flow is mostly one way. It comes in, usually as sunlight, gets converted by plants, moves up the food chain, and eventually it's all lost as heat. Thermodynamics in action. You need constant input from the sun.
But chemicals are different.
Chemicals, water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, they cycle. They get used, transformed, moved around within the ecosystem and potentially between ecosystems, but they aren't used up and lost like energy is. They circulate.
So the sun powers it all. But how much of that solar energy actually gets captured and used by life?
That's primary production. The amount of light energy converted into chemical energy stored in organic molecules by autotrophs, plants, algae, some bacteria. This sets the energy budget for the entire ecosystem.
Is all of that available to animals that eat the plants?
Not quite. We distinguish gross primary production, GPP, the total captured, from net primary production, NPP. NPP is GPP minus the energy the producers use themselves for respiration. So NPP is like the ecosystem's take-home pay, the energy actually available for consumers, the herbivores and carnivores.
What limits how much production happens?
In water, it's often light how deep it penetrates in nutrients, especially nitrogen and phosphorus. And this is where human impacts are huge. Runoff from sewage or fertilizers dumps massive amounts of these nutrients into lakes or coastal areas.
Causing eutrophication.
Exactly, eutrophication. You get these huge algal blooms, they die, decompose, use up all the oxygen, leading to fish kills and dead zones, like the big one in the Gulf of Mexico.
And on land, what limits production there?
On a large scale, temperature and moisture are key. Think deserts versus rainforests. But locally, within a biome, it's often soil nutrients again. Nitrogen and phosphorus are common culprits. Plants have evolved amazing ways to get these, like partnerships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria or fungi.
This feels like a good place to ask. How is climate change messing with this fundamental process, with NPP?
It's having major effects, and often negative ones. We're seeing hotter droughts, higher temperatures making droughts worse. This fuels more intense wildfires and helps insect pests like the mountain pine beetle spread rapidly.
Decimating forests, reducing their NPP.
Right. And maybe even more worrying, some ecosystems, particularly in the Arctic, seem to be shifting. Warming increases how much microbes respire, breaking down organic matter and releasing CO2. So places that used to absorb CO2, acting as carbon sinks, are now starting to release it, becoming carbon sources, which of course makes climate change even worse. It's a feedback loop.
That's sobering. Okay, so NPP is the base energy. How much of that actually gets passed up the food chain?
Trophic efficiency. It's surprisingly low. On average, only about 10% of the energy from one trophic level, say, plants, makes it into the next level, the herbivores that eat them. And then Only about 10% of that energy makes it to the carnivores.
Only 10% each step.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a rough rule of thumb, but it explains a lot. It's why food chains are usually pretty short. There just isn't enough energy left after 4 or 5 steps. It's why animals at the top of the food chain are relatively rare.
and vulnerable, I guess, if their food source declines.
Very vulnerable. The inefficiency magnifies any problems lower down.
Okay, that's energy flow. What about the other key process, chemical cycling, the matter itself?
Right, biogeochemical cycles. Each element, water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, has its own pathway. Water cycles through evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff, transpiration from plants. Carbon moves between the atmosphere as CO2, oceans, living things through photosynthesis and respiration, and fossil fuels. Nitrogen is tricky, lots of it in the air, but unusable N2 gas. It needs nitrogen fixation, mostly by bacteria, to become ammonia or nitrates that plants can use. Humans now add huge amounts through fertilizers, massively altering the cycle.
And phosphorus.
Phosphorus is different again. Its main reservoirs are in rocks. It cycles locally through soil and water, but there's no major gas phase like with carbon or nitrogen. It's often a limiting nutrient because it cycles more slowly. Experiments like the Hubbard-Brooks study showed just how important vegetation is in holding onto these nutrients. When they clear-cut a watershed there, the loss of nutrients like nitrates downstream skyrocketed.
Okay, so we have this incredibly complex system, energy flowing, chemical cycling, species interacting, all shaped by climate and geology. And then there's us, humans. How does our massive influence fit into this? This leads us to conservation, doesn't it?
It really does, because our influence is undeniable and often, unfortunately, detrimental. We're in the midst of a biodiversity crisis. Species are going extinct at rates far, far above the natural background rate, maybe 100 to 1,000 times higher.
And this loss matters at different levels, right? Not just losing species.
Exactly. We lose genetic diversity within species, which is the raw material they need to adapt to future changes. We lose species diversity, the sheer variety of life in communities. And we lose ecosystem diversity, the variety of habitats and the crucial services they provide.
Why should the average person care deeply about losing, say, an obscure insect or fungus, beyond just feeling bad about it?
Well, there's the moral argument, and many people feel an innate connection to nature biophilia. But there are also incredibly practical reasons. Ecosystem services. These are the benefits we get from healthy ecosystems for free. Things like clean air and water. Remember New York City investing in watershed restoration instead of a hugely expensive treatment plant.
Right.
Pollination of our crops, control of pests, decomposition of waste, formation of fertile soil. It's estimated these services are worth trillions of dollars globally each year. We also lose potential resources, like medicines derived from plants or microbes. The Rosie Periwinkle gave us cancer drugs. What else is out there that we're losing before we even find it?
Okay, so it's vital. What are the main drivers of this loss? What are we doing wrong?
There are four main threats, often acting together. The biggest one, by far, is habitat loss and fragmentation, turning forests into farmland, cities expanding, dams changing rivers. This destroys or breaks up the places species need to live.
Number one threat.
Yeah.
What else?
Introduce species. Species that we move, accidentally or intentionally, to places they aren't native. They can outcompete natives, prey on them, spread disease. Think zebra mussels in the Great Lakes or the brown tree snake devastating birds on Guam. Then there's overharvesting, taking more individuals than can be replaced naturally. We saw this with the passenger pigeon, the great auk. We see it now with many fisheries, like bluefin tuna, or with illegal poaching of elephants and rhinos.
Habitat loss, introduced species, overharvesting. What's the fourth?
Global change. This is a broader category that includes things like pollution, acid rain, and, critically, climate change. The warming temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, ocean acidification. These are altering habitats, shifting species ranges, disrupting breeding cycles, making organisms more vulnerable to disease or stress.
You mentioned pollution. How does that fit in? Things like toxins.
Yes, toxins are a major issue within global change. Things like pesticides, industrial chemicals, heavy metals. A key problem is biological magnification. These toxins accumulate in organisms and they become more concentrated at higher trophic levels. So a top predator eats lots of contaminated fish, and the toxin level in its own body becomes dangerously high.
Like DDT and bird eggshells.
Yeah.
Rachel Carson's silent spraying.
Exactly, that classic example. Or PCBs affecting herring gulls in the Great Lakes. We're even finding pharmaceuticals flushed into waterways are affecting aquatic life, like changing sex ratios in fish. It's pervasive.
Okay, the picture seems grim. Is there hope? What are we actually doing about it? What are the conservation strategies?
There is home, absolutely. Conservation biology is a dynamic field. One approach focuses on small populations. Tiny populations get trapped in an extinction vortex. Inbreeding and genetic drift reduce adaptability, making them even smaller and more vulnerable. So the focus is on increasing size and genetic diversity, like managing grizzly bears in Yellowstone.
What if the population isn't tiny yet, but it's clearly declining?
That's the declining population approach. You diagnose what specific environmental factor is causing the decline, regardless of current size, and try to fix it. Like identifying that red-cockaded woodpeckers need forests with low undergrowth maintained by fire, and then managing the habitat accordingly.
So focusing on the cause of the decline makes sense. What about protecting whole areas?
That's landscape-level conservation. Establishing protected areas is key, especially focusing on biodiversity hotspots areas with high concentrations of endemic species found nowhere else. Designing reserves smartly helps too, like zoned reserves with strictly protected core areas buffered by zones allowing some human activity. Costa Rica has been a pioneer here, and connecting fragmented habitats with movement corridors, even things like wildlife overpasses over highways, can make a big difference.
And what if an ecosystem is already damaged? Can we fix it?
That's restoration ecology, actively trying to repair degraded ecosystems. Sometimes it involves bioremediation using organisms like microbes or plants to detoxify polluted sites. Other times it's biological augmentation, adding essential materials or species back, like planting nitrogen-fixing plants to restore soil fertility or adding mycorrhizal fungi to help trees grow.
So it sounds like the ultimate goal has to be finding a way for humans and nature to coexist better.
Precisely. Sustainable development. Meeting our current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. It requires integrating ecological thinking into economics and social policy. Costa Rica is often cited as an example where investing in conservation and ecosystem services went hand in hand with improvements in human health and welfare. It shows it's possible, but the challenge is immense. Our global population is still growing, though maybe not exponentially anymore, and our ecological footprint, the amount of land and resources each person requires, is often far beyond what Earth can sustain long term. Choices about consumption, technology, and population are all part of the solution.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey through ecology. From global climate down to nutrient cycles, species interactions, and our own huge impact. It really drives home how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? The physical world, the living world, us.
It really does. And understanding these principles isn't just, an academic exercise. It's fundamental. It's essential for figuring out how we manage resources, protect biodiversity, deal with climate change, basically how we ensure a healthy planet for ourselves and everything else.
Yeah, it sets the stage for tackling so many specific challenges. It highlights how actions, even small ones, can ripple through that web. So for you listening, thinking about all these complex interactions and maybe unexpected consequences we've discussed, what's one small immediate change you could realistically make in your own life? Something that might have a surprisingly positive ripple effect in an ecosystem you interact with, maybe even just your backyard or local park. Definitely something to ponder.
Great thought to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.